This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi show number 322. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, and rhetoric. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of my black Lucasfilm coffee mug. So excited to chat with you this week about the return of the Clone Wars and take a look back at what this incredible series was, what it means to Star Wars, and what you should be looking for in the upcoming season. One Nation Coffee is the official brew of Coffee with Kenobi. For the best coffee in the galaxy, go to onenationcoffee.com and sign up for a subscription service so you never miss out on the best coffee in the galaxy. Coffee with Kenobi is brought to you by MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. For all of your travel needs to the Disney theme parks, the cruise lines, or anywhere you want to go on vacation, be sure to go to our affiliate link, which can be found in the show notes, on the front of our webpage, or on our Twitter feed, and sign up for a free, no obligation quote. You'll have the best vacation possible and help out Coffee with Kenobi in the process. On today's show, as I just mentioned, we're going to be looking at the importance of Clone Wars and talk about some of our favorites. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee are two returning guests to tackle this daunting Clone Wars episode, but it's going to be fun. And if you say fun and you say Star Wars, there's really one name, right? That would be Holly Frey, the co-host of Stuff You Missed in History Class and Full of Sith. Holly, welcome back.
Thank you. That's the sweetest intro ever.
Well,
I do have my coffee. I'm drinking it out of my Baby Yoda Tervis cup. So I'm ready.
And everyone will be happy to know. Well, maybe a little envious, but before we started recording, she already gave a Greedo reference, so we're already off to a good start.
Oh, all day, every day.
I love it. Well, also joining us on the show, it's been a while since we've had this gentleman on, but it is great to chat with Craig Dickinson. Craig, welcome back to Coffee with Kenobi.
Thanks, Dan. It's good to be back. Yeah, it's like at least once a year I'm back, and I was like, it's about time I come back on and talk to my buddy. So yeah,
that's right. Well, I'm glad. And another bonus is that this year in celebration, we're actually going to get to meet face to face.
I know. Pretty excited about that.
I am too. I'm very excited about that. Well, let's talk Clone Wars. Obviously, the new season is starting up very, very soon. And I was actually surprised. I don't know about the two of you, but I've had quite a few people who are huge Star Wars fans who have said to me, either I've only seen a couple of them, or I'm not caught up, or I didn't really give it a chance. So this is kind of my last-ditch effort to say, hey, well, it's not really realistic to binge the entire series before the new season starts. There are certainly key things and moments that jump out about Clone Wars. So, Holly, for you, sort of where is the Clone Wars in your overall pantheon of Star Wars-ness?
I watch. What's kind of interesting is that I was working at Cartoon Network when we launched Clone Wars there. I didn't work on it, to be clear, but I watched it initially, and then I totally fell off the wagon for a long time. And so then I had to binge the whole thing later on. So that's kind of where it is for me. I feel like it's one of those things. I love it, but there is so much content there. I never really feel like I have the level of command of all of the minutia of it that I might have of other aspects of Star Wars. So in a way, though, that's really exciting because every time I pull up an episode or even try to do a chronological rewatch or anything, I'm always discovering something new. It's like the gift that keeps giving.
I agree. And just to keep track of the different systems and planets alone is, oh boy, there's a lot there. Craig, what about you? Where is Clone Wars for you?
Yeah, I kind of a similar kind of story. I came to Clone Wars kind of late. When it dropped in 2008, we had just had our son. And so I didn't really have a lot of time to watch it. And so I'd watch it here and there and was thrilled that, it was weekly Star Wars and that was cool. But it was so hit or miss for me until it came to Netflix. And then I just binged the snot out of that thing. So I've seen, most of the episodes I've only seen once. I've gone back for some of my favorite ones to see them multiple times. And there are, like Holly said, I feel like I know it enough where I can reference different things, but there's so many different layers that I haven't even been able to get to dig into. And I'm doing a rewatch with my kids now, and that's just like a whole other extra level.
Disney Plus right now on their main page has a sort of a 20 episodes you should watch. In essence, that's what they mean. And from what I can tell, they appear to be the episodes that will be most pertinent to this new season.
Makes sense.
Which is great. And my son, he's watched a couple of them with me. We watched the episodes where Maul comes back. And, we've had a lot of fun with that. I think overall, I watched Clone Wars from the beginning. I remember going to the theater when it came out. I actually went with Lisa Dullard, who was our CWK media specialist, and a bunch of other of our friends. And I remember being whelmed. Not overwhelmed or underwhelmed, but just kind of whelmed. And while I enjoyed it, I just think I was still sort of in a, gosh, Star Wars is over. Revenge of the Sith just came out a few years ago. Woe was me. But I still watched it because it was Star Wars and I knew it was canonical, although that was kind of a debate for a while until finally George said, yeah, this is part of it. And which means something to me. And I just think, while it took a while to kind of find its legs, there were a lot stronger episodes as the series went on. And then by the time we were halfway through season 3, all the way to the end, I mean, you were talking about some electric storytelling and really a lot of great examples and opportunities for George to talk about the Force, among other things. Now, what I've asked our friends here to do is come up with sort of the top 5 things, moments, arcs, episodes, what have you. I mean, is it fair to say that we don't even need to mention Ahsoka because we all agree that she's one of the best things to come out of Star Wars in the 40-plus year history, or do we want to save her for our lists?
I have a little Ahsoka action on my list, but it's not much. It's one thing.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah. I mean, you could do an entire year of Ahsoka and still not scratch the surface of how cool she is. Well, Holly, why don't we start with you? Tell me the first thing that pops up for you when we're talking about favorites.
I'm so predictable. It's the episode from season 3 called Sphere of Influence where we get more Greedo finally. But I actually really love that episode for a number of reasons. This is the one where Greedo is hired to kidnap Baron Papanoida's kids, his daughters. But we get a lot of interesting things. It's one of the few times that Rada pops back up from the movie that launched the series. We don't get a lot of tie-in with that character, which is nice. It's also a good microcosmic example of the separatist manipulation of everything that was going on in the galaxy and how they were drawing people in both to their side and sowing seeds of instability so that they could move in. Of course, there's Greedo, and he speaks Basic, which we didn't even know was a thing until then. He also has a little gambling problem, but, not everybody's perfect. There is a thing about Ahsoka in this that I love, which isn't super germane to her overall arc as a character, but it's one of the times that we really see her start to test her powers and what she's capable of when she tries to do the Jedi mind trick, which I love. And I really like that Baron Papanoida gets his moment where we find out that he is really a dude with a lot of power. He's super bad. He touches crime syndicates, but yet rises above them. And he can hold his own in a fight. That is why I love this episode.
You know what? I haven't seen that one since probably it first aired. And you brought up a lot of fun
you want
things.
to?
I do. I really actually do. But that episode sort of shows that Clone Wars throughout its history has some intense moments, some funny moments, some heartwarming moments, some revisions of characters, or really closer examinations of characters that we probably wouldn't have gotten if not for this series that I think is really quite welcoming.
Yeah.
Craig, what about your first one?
So I looked more at like what the overall importance of Clone Wars would be. When I think of Clone Wars, like what are the kind of the big themes that I think of? And the first thing that came to my mind was that it's the last Lucas produced Star Wars. And it's the most hours of Star Wars that he ever did was in this form. And so, we talked about, whether or not it's the movie was canon, like you mentioned that earlier. And then to think about the fact that the creator of Star Wars spent so much time doing this. Of course it's canon, and it's kind of like his last legacy, that along with, bringing Dave Filoni into the fold and kind of passing on what he'd learned there. And so you kind of have that spirit of Lucas still in the company, even though the man himself is retired. And I think that's one of the most important things about Clone Wars.
Yeah, I'd say Dave Filoni and Ahsoka Tano are the two most impactful things about Clone Wars. And I'm glad you brought that up. There's actually, I can't think which season it is. It might be season 3. But there's a documentary that's sort of been making its way online, a real quick one on the extra features, where George talks to Filoni and some of the other creators of the Clone Wars about the Force. And it is a master class in philosophy and religion in the Force. It's absolutely stunning to examine and to listen to. I'm sure you both are familiar with that.
Yeah. Isn't that it's on the Blu-ray box set?
Well, it's on one of the regular seasons too.
Yeah.
On Blu-ray. Holly, have you seen it?
I have, but I will be super frank and tell you it's a thing I have watched in the background, and I haven't sat down and just watched it, because that is often how I'm consuming media, is while I do 3 other things.
I was gonna say you're a pretty busy person, so I totally understand. Well, someday when you have nothing else going on in the universe, you should totally dial in, because it's really, really fascinating. Speaking of fascinating, my first one is definitely a deep cut. It is the episode "A Sunny Day in the Void." Yes, it's extremely unusual and a little bit trippy, I suppose you could say. This episode in particular, there's hardly any speaking at all besides some droid beeps and boops. You have Colonel Gascon, voiced by the amazing, Stephen Stanton. And I remember liking it from day one. I felt like it was just very sort of philosophical and profound, and just sort of talking about the emptiness that is kind of there in life. And I just think there's a lot of interesting, fascinating stuff that you could do some interesting analysis with. You can certainly write a profound philosophy paper on it. And then the final episode in this arc is when we get the return of Gregor, one of the clone troopers who we thought was gone. And I thought that was really, really cool too. He shows up later in Star Wars Rebels. He was always one of my favorites. It was just unlike anything I'd ever seen in Star Wars. It really left a mark on me. Holly, we are back to you. What is your second one?
I'm trying to figure out which of these I should pick. This is another one that I just love because I love it, and it adds to the lore in a way that to me is really fun. It's the Hunt for Zero in season 3. Because we get Cy Snoodles again. And we see this great intrigue with her. We get a little bit of Cad Bane and his crew. What I really love is that we get to see Nal Hutta. There's that fabulous, almost like the opening of Indiana Jones with the Chinese version of Anything Goes. We have a great Twi'lek dancing girls wearing Hutt headdresses doing a big song and dance number, which is great. We get Zero, of course, which I love. And we get Zero's mama, which is another fascinating thing. There's some Quinlan Voss in there. And it's one of those, like, in terms of if you love Star Wars lore, it is like a delicious meal, because there's so much that touches on things we've heard about throughout the years, and now we actually get to see it.
And this is the episode, if I'm correct, where they've got a really disturbing ending with Cy Snoodles, where I thought, oh my, I don't know if I'll ever look at that character the same way again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we find out, right? Like, one, don't cross Cy Snoodles, but also that she kind of has this whole other life that she has lived, and she works for the Hutts, and she is shockingly comfortable with violence.
Yes, that is for darn sure. Craig, what's your second one?
So for my second one, I want to talk about just how Clone Wars was an entry point for kids at that point. Some that might have missed out on the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy, and then they have this series that's very much geared for them. And I want to tie that into the Younglings arc. That was one of the arcs that I really, really appreciated. It shows Ahsoka just being a badass, and it has, kids as the main characters, so the audience can really identify with the protagonists as they're going through. And plus, you get a whole bunch of great lore about finding lightsaber crystals and how lightsabers are created, and of course, there's Hondo throughout that as well. So that's one of my big ones.
Hondo too. I can't believe I forgot to put Hondo on this list. Hondo is, he's one of the most entertaining parts of Star Wars. He's so entertaining that they brought him to Galaxy's Edge, and he's a focal point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. My second one is Mortis. And I feel like this, along with Ahsoka, is sort of like cheating, because of course we're going to talk about Mortis.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I've only seen the Mortis arc one time in my entire life, which is a little surprising. I know. And it's not for any reason other than just life. And I want to circle back to it. And I really want to dive in very, very closely and really do a lot of stuff with it on the show. I just haven't had a chance. So I just know that watching it week to week when it came out and watching it with my older boys, and one of my favorite things about Clone Wars, and you talked about this a little bit ago, Craig, is that I watched the last two seasons of this before it was taken off of Cartoon Network. I watched these two seasons with the boys, and it was just so wonderful to experience new Star Wars with them and the conversations we would have. And, hey, what do you think's going to happen here? What do you think this means? And nothing brought that to us more than the Mortis arc. And, seeing an older Ahsoka in a Force vision, and seeing this wonderful moment of dramatic irony with Anakin. And there's just a lot of symbolism. Of course, we come back to it in Rebels. It's just fantastic storytelling that is really quite profound too.
Absolutely. And I've only seen it twice. I watched it the first time through, and then I watched it again when the Rebels referenced it, and I knew I had to rewatch that just so that I would fully appreciate what was going on in Rebels. So,
right. And if memory serves, I think each episode gets a little bit better.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think so. Holly, back to you. Your third one.
I'm glad you mentioned Galaxy's Edge, because there's a very specific reason this is now one of my favorites. It's the Gathering episode from season 5, where we see the young Padawans go and find their kyber crystals on Ilum. And it's one of those things that I always liked it as an episode, but after going to Galaxy's Edge and doing the Savi's lightsaber experience and selecting your crystal and building your saber, this is more meaningful than ever. Like, I think if you've done that experience, which is very moving in my opinion, and it's really wonderful. Mm-hmm. I was never like a lightsaber person per se. Like, I always thought they were neat, but everybody has their favorite stuff. And that was never one of my big, I want a lightsaber. But now, having done that, and also just, years of sponging up as much Star Wars as I can, when you think about the meaning of that moment of bonding with this thing that is, as Obi-Wan tells Anakin, your life, it just has a lot more meaning. It's also got some really spectacularly beautiful moments in it, just visually. When the Rodian Padawan, and I know it's not just because it's a Rodian, but falls through the ice into a lower level cave, and there are crystals everywhere. There's a really beautiful shot where the Rodian is kind of fallen and is looking up, and you see those eyes, which is one of the best things about the Clone Wars, is how they do Rodian eyes, so they look sort of like galaxies. But then as the shot pulls back, all of those crystals in the darkness also look like their eyes, and it's really, really beautiful. And I just love the idea. It's such a simple lesson, but we all forget it throughout our lives, about believing in yourself and trusting your instincts and going into something without presupposition about how it's going to play out, which is really important stuff. But we all kind of get so wadded up in all of our daily to-do things that I think we lose track of that inherent instinct. So I love it. And it's become definitely one of my favorite episodes of the entire series.
That is absolutely beautifully said, and why people need to go to your TEDx talk, by the way. No, and I will say too, the Savi's workshop and that experience is the most wonderful part of Galaxy's Edge. That's saying something, considering how magical that place is. I know you share a huge affinity for it as well, Holly.
I do.
It's just magical, that experience. I got very emotional during it. I didn't think that I would.
Same.
This summer I'm bringing my son, and he's 6, and I cannot wait. I mean, part of me is like, oh, maybe I'll build a Sith lightsaber, but you know what? I'm not. I'm just going to watch him drink that in, because the music, there's so much to that. You got to see it. It's the best.
Yeah, we are going in a couple of weeks. We're going to be there during Mardi Gras, and we're going for. Yeah, we've decided, since the Orlando iteration of Galaxy's Edge, Batu East as we call it, is in a park with alcohol. It's kind of like Space New Orleans. So we are gonna spend Mardi Gras there. We are also doing, if anybody wants to check out my Twitter, we did a t-shirt design around it that all the proceeds are going to World Central Kitchen. So if anybody else wants to celebrate our Star Wars Mardi Gras, which we're calling Hut Tongs Day because we're silly, they're welcome to do that. But I am taking 2 of my best friends, and we booked them an experience at Savi's. And my husband and I have been like strategizing how we're going to like document their experience, because we know they're both going to love it and cry.
Yes.
So yeah, that's one where we're like, no, we're not doing it this time. We are just there literally to capture them experiencing it. So I'm very excited.
Oh, we will be watching this on Twitter for sure. Craig, what's your third one?
So the next thing I was thinking about was just how the Clone Wars fills in a lot of the gaps that people had, questions that people had, everything from Anakin's characterization to things that I really enjoyed was hearing more about how Order 66 works. When I started looking at what arcs I really enjoyed, it ended up being a lot of the later ones. You had that whole great thing about Fives figuring out the conspiracy, and that first person perspective and of him trying to figure out the mystery, and then ended up, spoiler alert, not being able to share what he finds. And then, the whole Yoda arc explaining the balance between the living and the cosmic force, and getting into Force ghosts, and you get Liam Neeson back. And it's a lot of these things that it kind of feels very cinematic. Like it kind of belongs in the movies, but like Lucas gets another pass at that, to be able to put this lore back in. And so we do still have it in canon. So for me, that's one of the big things.
Yeah, I have a feeling we may revisit that topic in a little bit.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, my third one is the Younglings arc as well. And it's powerful. It's cool to see Ahsoka fully as the lead mentor. And like you said before, Holly, it shows, I think for the first time canonically, how they earn their kyber crystals and what that means and what those trials are like and why they're so intense and important. And this is another one I'm dying to show my son. I just think it's really lovely. And as you said, the art in this, the animation in this is gorgeous. The way they do the lighting, the intensity of the tests, how realistic they feel, and the overall metaphor about, as you said, trusting in your instincts, trusting in who you are, not letting fear or anxiety or doubt get in the way of your goals and what you want to do with your life. And I think the Younglings arc does that about as well as it gets. So, well, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to finish out our list. And just by talking to these two, I've come up with about 3 or 4 honorable mentions. So I'm going to put them in there. And I suggest we strap in. It's going to be a lot of fun. We will be right back. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Rise of the Resistance is now open on both coasts, Walt Disney World and Disneyland. So you need to be sure and book some experiences to the East and West Coast. You can experience Star Wars, Galaxy's Edge, and Rise of the Resistance. And I can think of no better way to do that than through MEI and Mouse Fan Travel. Their signature service and expert advice will help clients maximize their vacation time and dollar. Their no cost, no obligation quote when you use the service is really wonderful. And they also proactively adjust the booking if the rate goes down. They will help your family enjoy everything Galaxy's Edge and the Disney theme parks and the cruise lines have to offer, help plan every detail, and will share invaluable tips. Be sure to go to our affiliate link, which can be found in the show notes, on the front of our webpage or on our social media and sign up for a free, no obligation quote. You'll have the best vacation possible and help out Coffee with Kenobi in the process. So be sure to tell them that Dan Z and Coffee with Kenobi sent you. I would love to take this opportunity to thank our CWK Patreon contributors: Jason Hall, Dennis Keithley, Colby Mead, Jessica Berry, Adam Bankhurst, David Nicely, Jeff Ellis, Ross Halliban, Frank Mulder, Alexander Moylan, Aaron Harris, Chris Kavarka, Angela Sauce, Susan Gray, Connie Shee, Tyler Pampa, Hannah, Yancey Evans, Alex Procasio, Ian Thompson, Simbat Detradarian, Christine Turk, Sean Reed, Kurt McKillen, Dan Ream, Brian Harding, Blake Weaver, Jim Capron, Caroline Maselli, Chris Metz, LJ Souter, Thea Selby, Daz Davies, Christian Dale, Brian McKinney, Jared Cantor, BJ Smith, Eric Struthers, Nick Deco, and Mark Suter. As a Coffee with Kenobi Patreon contributor, you help out our show in so many ways. The web hosting, the fees that go into it, upgrading our equipment, the travel, the things that we need to do to cover the different events. It all is because of your Patreon contributions and generosity. But you also get something out of it as well. For $5 or more a month, you get access to CWK Pour-Over, which is our weekly podcast not heard anywhere else, hosted by myself, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. And for $10 or more a month, you get access to CWK Lens for behind-the-scenes video and images as well. So if you're curious about this and want to find out more, go to www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi and check out all the things we offer. And be sure to ask me any questions that you have. We love to have you support and be a part of our Coffee with Kenobi Patreon family. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for your consideration. We are back, and I believe, are we back to you, Holly?
I think so.
I think so too. Well, go right ahead.
This is one of those instances where something in the Clone Wars helped me make a little bit of peace with some of my some of the things I was not in love with in Rise of Skywalker. It's gonna sound crazy. It's the Zillo Beast arc, which I love to begin with because it harkens back to, you know, Godzilla, King Kong, kaiju movies, which I love anyway. But one of the things that's fascinating in that to me is that once they have that beast in hand, Palpatine commands scientists to start working on cloning of it. And you realize that there are seeds like that of Palpatine still trying to figure out how to command life and potentially the living force that we actually see implemented a little bit in The Rise of Skywalker with him trying to regain life again. And when you realize this has been a quest for him throughout, for me, like I said, I you know, whatever anybody loves about the new movie or doesn't, totally cool. I had some struggles coming to terms with the fact that Palpatine was reintroduced and became such a pivotal part of it. But that kind of gave me a moment of like, oh, this has kind of been seeded in various ways. Like, it's not out of left field entirely. It's something that has been kind of little hints of things like this as a possibility have always been there. So, and again, also just because it's a great kaiju story.
I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. That actually does help a little bit because I like you, and of course we talked about this a lot last week. The Rise of Skywalker certainly fell flat in a lot of areas for me, but there are some things there mythologically that certainly tap into that. Craig, what's your next one?
So my next one is something that I kind of wonder about the intentionality of it, but the Clone Wars as a series proved that Star Wars works as a long form episodic series. And where we're at now, we wouldn't have things like The Mandalorian if we didn't have the Clone Wars being as successful as it was. We wouldn't have a Kenobi series on the horizon, Cassian Andor series. We wouldn't have Rebels. We wouldn't have Resistance. It's like, it was really the first time we got to see that form stretched out, where we get to see multi-story arcs and stretch things out, where stories could be told in a way that wouldn't necessarily work in a movie. You know, you could do the droid arc like you talked about for different people, and it becomes very much more like a buffet. You can kind of pick and choose what episodes speak to you. And there's another one coming down the line as well. So for me, that's one of the big things that Clone Wars did, that it was a trailblazer in that regard.
Very much. And I think it did, as you both have mentioned. So it was a sort of a nice balm for making peace with some aspects of Star Wars. I mean, the prequels, I think, as time has gone on, has gotten more appealing for people who are sort of on the fence with it. But this sort of contextualized and gave a lot more weight and pathos to a lot of these characters. My next one is my very favorite arc in the entire series, and that is the Rako Hardeen arc.
Mm-hmm.
This is the arc where Obi-Wan Kenobi fakes his death, disguises himself as a bounty hunter named Rako Hardeen. He shaves his head, shaves his beard, goes through some changes physically so that he will look like a different person. It's so effective because the reason they're doing this is because they want to prevent a separatist plot to kidnap Palpatine, which is ironic. And it's done so effectively that Anakin legitimately believes for a significant amount of time that Obi-Wan is actually dead. Mm-hmm. And, let's talk about, the challenges to that and to allowing someone to believe that you're dead because of this plot, because of what the Jedi are continually being forced to do in the Clone Wars. You see even more how the Clone Wars have warped the Jedi way. Nothing really does that quite as well as this episode, or this arc, the 3-episode arc, in my opinion. Plus, we get a lot of Cad Bane, who, before the Mandalorian came along, I would have said was my favorite bounty hunter in Star Wars. Although Din Djarin has certainly taken that mantle to me. But it's great. I really can't recommend it enough. It's tremendous.
I almost put the episode The Box on my list because that's another one that kind of harkens back to some horror and thriller tropes that I really love. And it's just really fascinating to watch Obi-Wan navigate through all of that, sometimes seeming effortlessly and other times really seeming like he's struggling with it, which is kind of a wonderful juxtaposition to watch his character go through.
It really is. It really put stretched them to their limits as far as what they were capable of or what they thought they were capable of, and if they should even go there in the first place. But that's really what war does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
for sure. Holly, what is the next one on your list?
I'm very predictable with this one, and it's just The Wrong Jedi, season 5, episode 20, which sets up Ahsoka's entire future, which the thing that makes that fascinating to me is that it becomes such a pivotal moment in the storytelling we have gotten since then. That really is like a linchpin of Star Wars lore as it has played out in other series, things that echo into the films. And it's one of those things I always kind of get heart sunk when people are like, I don't watch the animation. I'm like, you're missing really important stuff. Because, I mean, obviously, it is not easy to watch. I was so upset the first time I saw it, as I know many people were. It's really difficult to see. But it's also a good moment where you recognize that as much as we laud and really revere Jedi in a lot of our discussions about them, and in world, that's the case, they were as fallible as anyone, right? Like, they lost their way in many ways, which creates that murkiness where great storytelling really comes from.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Go ahead, Craig, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, you see that in Last Jedi. Luke's talking about it. And it's, it becomes so apparent in that arc that the Jedi have lost their way. And I think, I mean, that's the way I always read that in Phantom Menace, that the Jedi are not infallible. They are not the moral authority that they pretend to be anymore. And we're meant to see things like they're testing this kid's blood to see if he's worthy, as that's a mistake. We're not supposed to look, they're depending on technology, and that's wrong. Of course it's wrong. That's the whole point.
I always compare it to that physics concept of in measuring something, you change its outcome. Mm-hmm. Like once you try to quantify the Force, you have lost touch with the Force.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
it's not Lucas that has it wrong. It's the Jedi that have it wrong. He's pointing that out to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, spelling it out. And the stubbornness, the pride, the arrogance, it's all there. Craig, what's the next one that you have?
I was going to talk about that one too. Just one last thing about that one, and I want to talk about Darth Maul a little bit. But for me, one of the most important things about that last Ahsoka arc is that they found a way to not kill Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. And it's just like Filoni is so good at putting these things, and you're like, well, they're going to have to get rid of that, but not the way that you think. Which I just thought was genius. No, she's not going to die. She's going to walk away. There's a whole other avenue.
And she was gone for a significant amount of time too.
Yeah. Just bringing Darth Maul back, period. And like, really, there's a couple of arcs that go with that. And, it's a radical idea. I mean, the guy was chopped in half, fell down a shaft. Yeah, he's fine. It's a Lucas idea. Bring him back. So it's all good. But the way he comes back and we see him fleshed out as this master manipulator and this tactician. And he's Palpatine's apprentice in every way. And to see him just being intelligent, where he just seemed to be almost just an animal in Phantom Menace. And for him just to hold that grudge so tightly and to, that literally hate kept him alive. And to get that measure of revenge against Obi-Wan and have all of that power. And then just to see, in that penultimate moment, Sidious comes in and just beats him down. It's like, how bad of a guy is Sidious that we've already seen Maul built at this level that he can just be taken out like that? So just so much world building and just character development from bringing Maul back. It seemed like almost like a stunt when it first started to happen, but now it's become this thing that we revere and we really appreciate. And that's the thing I'm absolutely looking forward to most with, as I think most people are, with these final few episodes coming up this spring.
Oh, I think so too. And I'm with you. When that was announced, I'm like, well, okay, how are they going to do this? I don't know. And I still think there are times it kind of walks the line. But, I mean, he's a character that people love. Obviously, Sam Witwer does a magnificent job voicing him. Yeah. And that's actually my next one. And it's just when Maul and Savage take on Palpatine. That's it. That's that moment right there. That lightsaber duel, the way that Palpatine, as he walks into that big empty room, just raises those guards in the air all the way to the ceiling without even trying. And you actually are frightened for Darth Maul and Savage Opress, who have been, bullying and bulldozing their way through the galaxy to try to get revenge on Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then this unassuming man, if you don't know him, just throws them around like they're rag dolls and enjoys it and electrocutes Darth Maul. No, I've got plans for you. Which we don't see until the comic book series.
Right.
And it's pretty scary stuff, pretty frightening, but very, very powerful and really a showcase for Palpatine, not only what he's capable of, but who he is. And he's pure evil. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So I think, was that the last one? 1, 2, yeah, that was the last one. So now we're on honorable mentions, I guess, aren't we?
Huh?
Does that sound right? 1, 2,
yes.
3. Yeah.
I think so.
Well, how many do you have, Holly?
Well, no, I prepped my 5, and I'm such a nerd that I highlight them as we go, so I know I've already talked about them, and we have exhausted those.
Okay, good.
I'm using a check mark, so.
Yes. I'm using my brain, which historically is not always the best idea. Yeah. So how many honorable mentions do you have? Just throw them all out there.
Oh, mine, when it gets to honorable mentions, I get really sloppy jalopy. It's really just like things that I like. There's a character that I love desperately that not everyone does. My husband in particular does not like him because of what he is. It's Admiral Trench, because I like spiders.
Admiral Trench, yeah.
And there is, in the Clone Wars trailer, a split-second image of what appears to be him, so I am very excited for the new season. I also love every time Wat Tambor shows up, because that's one of those character designs from the prequels that, like, we just did not get enough of that character, in my opinion, and I think it's really fantastic and creepy and wonderfully cool. They are actually in the Bad Batch arc together, which makes me happy in my dark little heart. Those are the ones I have listed. I'm very simple on this one.
No, those are pretty fun. Yeah, I agree. Wat Tambor, yeah. I'll never forget the first time he spoke in Attack of the Clones, how I was confused if there was something wrong with the audio, and then I realized that was just something they were doing. Yeah, it always puts a smile on my face.
I love it.
Craig, how many extras do you have, or just that you've sort of thought about while we were speaking tonight?
Yeah, I think I have about three things to say. The first one I was looking at was, again, legacy of Clone Wars is that because Clone Wars was as successful as it was even after the feature films, that I think that's really one of the big things that made it viable for Disney to buy. So if we don't have Clone Wars, we don't have the sequel trilogy, we don't have Rogue One, we don't have Solo, we don't have The Mandalorian. Again, all of these things that, was fresh in the public consciousness. It's still popular. There's still Happy Meals and action figures and all these other merchandise. Like, Star Wars never really went away this time. So that's that. And then another one I was talking about, the connection with the fans that the Clone Wars actors have had. Like, social media and the Clone Wars all kind of came together like about the same time, and it became a way where you can very easily interact with, the stars of the show in a way that we never could with either of the, prequel or original trilogy. And so, there's that level of fan involvement between that and Celebration and all of those things, which I think just it kind of endears Clone Wars to people as well. And then the last thing I had was talking about how, again, going back to whether or not Clone Wars was canon or not. And it's like they've really done a great job of establishing the fact that it is. And for me, that the moment that kind of crystallizes that is Maul showing up at the end of Solo. And then it's like, okay, all bets are off. Anything's fair game. That and Saw Gerrera being in Rogue One. As soon as I heard Saw Gerrera was in Rogue One, I'm like, we're getting Ahsoka in a feature film. Because why not?
Yeah.
Everything is fair game at this point. And
well,
that trust.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. From your mouth to God's ears. My last one is just sort of a smattering as well. But Cad Bane, Hondo Ohnaka, Saw Gerrera, all characters. Now, Saw is not necessarily a character that I like, and I don't know that you're supposed to.
Yeah.
But I do think he's interesting. That Onderon arc where Ahsoka is training everyone, where Saw first loses his sister, Steela. Very, very powerful stuff. Again, this series, more than anything, really showed the wars in Star Wars and what that means and how that's not something to be taken lightly, which is one of the things that I always like and I always talk about in regards to fiction, and that is fiction tells stories sometimes we're afraid to tell because you can attack them in a different way and help get people's minds open through story and storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so those characters are great. Hondo, I love how Hondo evolved. I love how he showed up on Rebels. Again, Cad Bane, just one of the coolest cats around. And then finally, that Yoda arc in the Netflix season that came out, season 6, is really tremendous. And there's a lot of fascinating stuff. As you mentioned, Craig, Liam Neeson comes back. We start to see how certain select Jedi are able to come back from the beyond, although it seems lately that seems to be a lot easier to do, but I'm sure those are stories that will be told later. And I thought that was fascinating. Yoda having this duel with his dark side funhouse mirror image of himself, I thought was great. And then, of course, Mark Hamill voicing, Darth Bane was pretty fantastic as well. Overall, just a really great one. Although I still will say that I don't love in the end of that Yoda arc how Yoda fights Darth Sidious. I mean, I realize it's supposed to be sort of a precursor to Revenge of the Sith, but I prefer that is such a powerful moment that we just kind of get one of those in Star Wars. But sure. They didn't ask for my vote.
Yeah. They didn't check with you first.
No. So I don't. Did either of you feel that way about that part?
I hadn't thought about it that way, but you make a good point that we so rarely see Yoda just go full on warrior that it is so impactful when it happens because of it. So now I'm like, oh yeah, that is a good point. If we just had the one.
I have moments. Holly.
Can I jump in real fast? I agree with that too. I mean, for me, it was amazing that they went the entire series without Anakin meeting Grievous, so that solidifies that part in in Revenge of the Sith. But the thing that always irks me is that they fight Dooku multiple times. And so when that line comes up in Revenge of the Sith, my powers have doubled since the last time I met him. Like, what, last week?
Yeah.
Like, wow. I mean, he's just on some kind of crazy training program. I don't know. That just kind of, I mean, it's one line, but
It's creatine is what it is. Yeah.
I mean, he's bulked up.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. We got way more Count Dooku and way more General Grievous, two of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Was it Corey Burton? Is he the voice of Dooku? He's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great.
And obviously, as you mentioned, I mean, James Arnold Taylor, Kat Tabor, Ashley Eckstein, Matt Lantern, Whitwer, D. Bradley Baker, wonderful people, fantastic members of the Star Wars community who continually give back with their enthusiasm. I'll never forget on Full of Sith, the week that Clone Wars was canceled, and Jad and Kat Tabor were on at the same time with Concetta and Mike and Brian, and just hearing the sadness, the like sincere sadness in these actors' voices, I really felt like, they were one of us. Like this wasn't just about promotion and a gig and liking Star Wars, but they truly were mourning the loss of this show as much as we were, which is another reason why it's so wonderful that it's coming back. I was in that room in Comic-Con in San Diego a couple years ago when they announced it. I will never forget it, the electricity in that room. And, it's going to pay off. Just revisiting Clone Wars with both of you has been tremendous. And do either of you want to bring anything else up before we wrap up the show?
I mean, I could keep listing things I love forever, but
Right.
we've all had plenty to chew on, I think.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, very, very good. Well, Holly, I want you to please let everyone know where they can find you and not only your podcast, but the great things you've got on the road. And I also want to take an opportunity. I've already talked with you, on the phone, but I want to thank you again for your really, really kind words in that Chicago Tribune article. I cannot tell you how much that meant to me.
Oh, my pleasure. That was one of the most hilarious interviews I've ever done because I was literally driving down I-75 to Galaxy's Edge at the time. So the writer that worked on that was incredibly patient with my dodgy. I was literally behind the wheel as my husband held the phone. So it was a very fun conversation with him, and he was super patient. And again, completely my pleasure.
Very, very, very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And let everybody know where they can hear the dulcet tones of your voice.
You can find me in Star Wars-y things on Full of Sith every week. I also have a history podcast, Stuff You Missed in History Class, which is also several times a week at this point. You can find me on Twitter as Surliest Girl and on Instagram as SurlyGirly5. If you're in the Atlanta area and you're looking for something to do the day after Valentine's Day, I have a TEDx talk about how we impact the future every day and how future historians will interpret our actions, which I'm excited to do and a little bit nervous, but so that's coming up this week.
Oh, man. Well, as I keep saying, I wish I could be there, but I know you'll be amazing. It's going to be so much fun. So much fun. Craig, do you have anything that you would like to share?
So the best way to get a hold of me right now is I'm Rogue 3 on Star Wars in the Classroom. I'm an English teacher and I teach Star Wars a couple of times.
Interesting.
Yeah. I do a big unit on the hero's journey at the end, and all of those materials are on that. And my Twitter handles there and email and stuff like that are there. And then I'm working on a project, been working on it for a little while with a colleague of mine, Matt Leader, and we're going to do Coruscant Community College is what we're calling it. It's going to be a seasonal podcast we're hoping to release starting in this spring that will examine Star Wars as text and kind of go over what we do as far as presenting it in the classroom and break it down in every which way that we can and do basically explain our methods and our theories behind it to start with, and then kind of just go film by film, aspect by aspect, and then just go from there.
It sounds fascinating. And if you ever have a chance to have any other teachers on, I can give you my resume. I'd love to be on.
Yeah, you're on my list to contact for sure.
I love it. Well, you and I have collaborated, in all honesty, throughout the years on Star Wars, and you've given me some great ideas that I've incorporated. And you're one of the good ones, man. So when you told me you were going to make this happen and create a podcast, I was absolutely thrilled. I can't wait to hear the first episode.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It sounds so great. Scholarly Star Wars is some of the yummiest Star Wars, so I cannot wait either.
Oh, appreciate it. Yeah, we're very excited.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are the podcast you're looking for. This is...
As we close out the show, I want to thank our CWK sponsors, MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, and One Nation Coffee. Please support them the way they support our podcast. And remember to listen to new and archived shows of Coffee with Kenobi wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, CastBox, Deezer, and our website, www.coffeewithkenobi.com, or wherever you enjoy listening to your favorite shows. And if you listen to the show through iTunes, please leave us a review. You can also find us on social media. In fact, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, give us a like on Facebook, and check us out on Pinterest. In addition to the places I just mentioned for Coffee with Kenobi, you can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, as well as on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR. You can find my writings on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com and IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. Don't forget to check out www.patreon.com/coffeewithkenobi to support our podcast and help us keep the lights on here in the Coffee with Kenobi studios. Our Patreon page is where you can listen to our exclusive weekly podcast, CWK Pour-Over, hosted by me, CWK newsman Tom Gross, and Coffee with Kenobi co-founder Corey Clubb for just $5 a month. There are also options for behind-the-scenes videos, photos, t-shirts, and more. Plus, 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital each month. Thank you to all of you who are currently supporting us on Patreon, and thank you for considering becoming a member of our Coffee with Kenobi Patreon family. And if you are considering starting a podcast or blog, let me know how I can help you get started and help you make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out my all-new venture, danzmedia.com, and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization, talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. A big thank you to Holly Frey and Craig Dickinson for joining me today on Coffee with Kenobi. Always fun to talk with the both of them, and I appreciate each and every one of you joining me and reflecting on the Clone Wars, what that means. If you're someone who has not quite seen all the episodes yet, or you've just kind of went through, pick and choose the ones that you think are interesting, that's great too. I have a feeling that you're going to be in for some exciting Star Wars when the new season comes out very, very soon. We cannot wait for that. Also, speaking of cannot wait, we finally launched CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and we already are building steadily. I'm really happy with the conversations. The nice thing about this Facebook group, again, is that unlike a page, you can just easily interact with people, much more like natural Facebook. And it's just an easier, more organic way to converse with your Star Wars friends. And it's great. We become like family. We talk about all kinds of fun Star Wars things, post pictures, review stuff, ask questions, and you get more immediate feedback. I'm having a blast, and I hope that you are too. Be sure to check it out, CWK Cafe, to be a part of that conversation. I will happily approve you and send you right in there. It's spoiler-free, it's fun, it's positive. We're not always going to agree on everything, but we can find a way to talk about it and express our thoughts. And I think that is a great way to continue building this wonderful community that we have. Thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about and break down the Star Wars saga with me. I really appreciate it and can't wait to talk with you next week. Until next time, thanks again, everybody. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.